everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing you my winter reading recommendations. So winter is one of my favorite times to kind of dive into books. Winter is my favorite season, so I feel like a lot of the times I just get really excited to read around this time of year. Like it's dark out early, like it's gonna be cold, and it's like the perfect time to get cozy with the book next to the fire. So I have compiled a list of 5 books here that either kind of have some wintry vibes or I just think are like a good time to read this. A lot of them, as I'm looking at my list here, I can see that a lot of them, for the most of them, have like they take place in the colder season, so I think it's just very fitting to kind of read these during this time of year. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, I have the One Trilogy by Nora Roberts. I was obsessed with this series, and I think I started reading them in like 2019, 2020, and I was obsessed with them. And especially reading them kind of over the course of the beginning days of the pandemic, it was just very eerie to read it. But this is kind of like a modern day urban fantasy, essentially, where there is this plague that takes this virus that is spread around the world, and it wipes out 2/3 of the population of the earth within a matter of weeks. And those who have some sort of immunity to this virus are those with some magical ability or magical blood in them. So you can see how that can cause some societal issues, and it kind of goes off from there. I think it's best not really to know too much about this. The first book is very much kind of setting up that world and that premise, and it's really the second book where everything really kicks into place. But this book, I think this trilogy in general is very unique in having kind of gone through a pandemic, obviously to not this scale, but to that was also very deadly. I think it really draws it home, and you can really relate to that feeling and that fear. But it is definitely, I haven't read anything like this ever before, and I don't hear a lot of people talk about this online, and I really think you need to go and check it out. I do have a full series review of this that I'll link up in the cards, so you can go check that out. But I definitely think this is really a great series to marathon during the winter time, and it is definitely, I've never read anything like it, so I highly recommend this trilogy. Next up, I have The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. This is kind of like almost like a thrillery, horror-y type book, which is very different from what I tend to read, but you can tell from the cover how it totally fits with like that wintry vibe. So it follows this girl who, this family like moves into this old house, and the mother goes missing. So while the mother's going missing, like the daughter stumbles upon these letters that were written in the 1800s by the previous owner, and it was a woman that was accused of basically going crazy, killing her daughter, and then ultimately herself. So not only is she trying to piece together what happened to her mother, we're getting kind of flashbacks of the woman who wrote the letters in the 1800s, and it kind of goes off from there. This does have like kind of magical realism, historical aspects into it as well, but it was just really creepy, especially like there's like certain scenes where they're describing like feeling watched from like something in the woods, and just the way it's described, like I could totally picture it, and like that silence that comes with like snowfall, like in the way that is described, like I totally felt that, and it's definitely something that you just really experience while reading it, like that whole like sensory imagination that you have. Like I totally was immersed in that. Like I said, something very different from what I tend to read, but it was definitely a lot of fun. It was really thrilling. It had my heart rate up, and when I was reading this back at my parents' house, my bedroom was on the main floor, and I was like terrified when I was reading at night. I'm like, someone's gonna look in through my window. We're surrounded by forest. Like it did freak me out, but it was definitely a lot of fun, and kind of getting that like cold, creepy vibe and like that silence from like a fresh coat of snow that happens. I think this book totally captures that feeling. Next up, I have The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. I believe this is the Winternight Trilogy, and I feel like this is the perfect time to read. Again, this is like a fantasy, historical fantasy with slight horror to it, I would say. It's loosely based on Russian folklore, but we follow this girl who grows up in this small Russian village, and she has this ability to kind of see some of the, not necessarily like paranormal, but kind of the fantastical creatures that surround their village and their world. So these are like, you leave certain things for like, the kitchen fairy or the bathroom fairy. She can see this. And so the first part of the book really follows her upbringing, and then ultimately there is this kind of bad I don't even know how to describe it, this bear that is wreaking havoc on her town, and it kind of goes off from there. This is really, I think, a very interesting trilogy because obviously it takes place in like Russian winter, but I feel like in terms of following, you follow basically this main character from birth to kind of late adulthood, or I guess like late teenage years into early adulthood in like her 20s. And so essentially kind of following this main character's growth over the years was definitely something that was really rewarding, and I really enjoyed getting to kind of see that and kind of experience and watch this character grow and evolve. And I do think the fantastical elements in here are really well done. The first book in particular, I feel it is like where you kind of get that horror-y feels or vibes to it, but it's definitely a lot of fun. I will say the first book does start out a little bit slow, but it is kind of the halfway point of book one where it really starts to pick up, and book two and book three are just amazing. It is probably one of my favorite adult fantasy series of all time, and I feel like the winter is the perfect time to read this, to totally immerse yourself in this world, in this small like Russian village, medieval times. I think is like, this is the perfect time to read it. Next up, I have Sorcery of Thorns. This is a recent read for me, and it was actually, I really enjoyed it. It is a YA standalone fantasy where we follow Elizabeth, who works in this magical library, and one day she ends up witnessing kind of dark magic resulting in a murder, and she ends up getting accused from that, and it goes off from there. This book was really a lot of fun. There is a lot, again, it kind of takes place around like where it's starting to get like winter weather, and I feel like just the atmosphere of having like this magical library with these dangerous tomes that have all this dark magic, and trying to figure out like what is like, who is responsible for kind of these dark magic episodes that are kind of keep popping up within the libraries of within this area. So I feel like not only do you have like kind of these light fantastical elements where there's like sorcerers and kind of secret books with spells, but also kind of the mystery of like there's something bigger kind of going on around here was really a lot of fun. And because it is a standalone, I feel like it is, again, it's not much of a commitment as opposed to a lot of like YA fantasy series. And I think this one is really unique. I really think the romance in here was done well. There's a lot of like kind of darker magic in here integrated into it, which I really enjoyed, and it was just a thrill to read, especially kind of the last like 100 pages or so. You just like hit the ground running and you're gonna just fly through it. So again, I feel like kind of having that cozy library vibe on like a fantastical story also makes it a lot of fun and just cozy to read around this time of year. And lastly, I have Gilded by Marissa Meyer, and this is her first foray into adult fantasy retellings, and this is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. So we follow this girl who has just been known to create elaborate lies, and one day on the full moon she gets kind of entangled with the evil kind of folk prince essentially, and she kind of talks her way out of kind of being taken from him. But on the next full moon he comes and takes her and asks her to spin straw into gold, and it kind of goes off from there. Again, this is one that takes place on that cold winter day, and there's like one of the opening scenes where we get to meet kind of this evil kind of fake creature is when it is like that first snow, like cold, quiet, snowy day, or snowy night I should say, and it's very creepy. I will say like the second book was really great. The first book it took me a little bit to get into, but again it really picks up the pace and I couldn't put it down. I think this was a really good job. I think if you like fairy tale retellings, and especially this one is like fairly dark, I think it is the perfect time to read around the winter time. Not only does it have like cold settings and like cold vibes, I think it is like totally atmospheric to read in the winter time. Again, I think if you like fairy tale retellings, I think this is, and if you liked her like Lunar Chronicles or even what is it, Heartless, I think you would definitely really like this one. This is again one I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I just think it is really fun to read around this time of year, and I really enjoyed it. I read it towards the end of 2022 and 2023, so it's still fresh in my mind, and I feel like that is like the end of the year, the beginning of the year is the perfect time to kind of binge this duology. So that's it guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your winter reading recommendations are and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.